welcome to the State of Education. And today we're going to talk a little bit about why some schools are moving to 4-day school weeks. So right now there are roughly 850 school districts across the United States that have adopted a 4-day school week. And this is up from 650 in 2020, and the trend isn't showing any signs of slowing down. Now, if we look at the nation's report card in reading, we can see that only 29% of students in the country, 8th grade students, were able to score proficient on the state's proficiency tests. That's not very many. That's just proficient. That's not advanced. Just being able to score the basics. And looking down at the data, we can see that only the Department of Defense Education Activity, which works with students who are the children of armed forces members, that's the only section that was able to score above 50% in reading. Everybody else, every single other state was below 50% of students proficient. And if we look at math, the scores are even lower. Looking into math, we see that only 29% of students were able to score proficient on the state math tests. And in math, not even the Department of Defense Education Activity was able to make it to 50%. Every single state had fewer than 50% of students scoring at proficient. There were even several states that had less than 20% of students who were able to score proficient in math. So, if our students are doing so poorly on state tests, why then are some schools trying to shorten the school week? You would think that if our students are failing, then we want to increase their time at school. We would want to provide more instruction, not less. However, that's exactly what's happening in districts across the nation, as more and more of them are opting to transition from the standard 5-day school week into a shorter 4-day school week. So why are they doing this? Well, first of all, let's look at how a 4-day school week works. Most of the time, it's done simply by just cutting out either Monday or Friday from the typical school week. Some schools choose to make that a day of at-home learning, while others just have 3-day weekends. And every state has its own guidelines on how many days or hours of instruction students need to get. So if we look down the list, we see that most states have a certain number of days that students must attend. Most of them also have a certain number of hours. Some of them even break it down by grade level and say kids in certain grades need to have this many and other grades need to have a different number. And then there are some states that don't have a number of hours. They just have a number of days that students need to be in school. So of course in those states it's going to be a little bit trickier to switch to a 4-day school week because it's going to be hard to get 180 days of school in. If you're cutting out a day each week, you're basically cutting the school year by 20% of days. So typically, when schools move to a 4-day school week, they have a longer school day. They'll add roughly an hour of school to the end of each day. It differs by district, obviously, but it's usually a longer school day in order to make up for the fact that a day is going to be missing at the end of the week. However, despite this, districts working on the shortened model average about 58 fewer hours of school each year. And in order for districts to change their academic calendar to 4 days per week, they must first meet certain requirements. So every state is a little different. Some of them will ask the schools to complete a waiver. Some want them to submit their plans to the state. Some of them will say you need to meet certain academic benchmarks. But in theory, the states will be monitoring the school and saying, okay, it looks like the 4-day school week is working for you, or maybe it's not. All right, on to the question of why are schools doing this? So the primary reason that districts decide to implement 4-day school weeks is, of course, to save money. Tight school budgets mean that administrators are looking for new and creative ways to save money. And currently the majority of 4-day school districts are in rural areas. Why rural areas? Well, these districts tend to have some needs that their urban and suburban counterparts just don't have to deal with. The biggest issue to contend with is transportation. So some urban districts have been able to nearly eliminate busing, especially at the elementary level, because they can have multiple schools across the district, and then every student is within walking distance. And the only students who are going to require transportation are the ones who have special transportation needs. If rural schools tried to do that, they would have a school out somewhere in the country that might be within walking distance of 3 or 4 families, but people are more spread out in the country, and it just doesn't make sense for them to try to build schools all across the area. So instead, as it is, bus drivers in rural districts are often being bused for hours at a time. They're driving down those long country roads, collecting students for quite a while. And that means that the schools have to put a greater portion of their budget towards transportation costs than those in more populated areas. Current research shows that districts only save about 0.4 to 2.5% by trimming down the school week to 4 days, and the maximum possible savings are estimated to be 5.43%. And those percentages might appear to be small, but in the context of school operating costs, they can amount to millions of extra dollars in funds that can be allocated to other areas of education. And these cost savings are the primary reason given for why administrators shorten their school weeks. But in addition to having more money in the budget, what are some other reasons that schools might switch to a 4-day school week? So here are a couple of the potential benefits that proponents of school day 4 weeks will give. One thing administrators often give is teacher recruitment and retainment. Administrators report that teachers are more likely to want to work in a district that has a shorter school week. They're also more likely to stay with the district for a longer period of time, and some administrators have even said that they've received more out-of-state applicants since moving to the shorter week. However, there's limited research available, but what we see so far is that not really many teachers seem as though they choose a district just for the shortened school week. And at best, this is only a short-term benefit, because if all of the schools in an area move to a 4-day week, then there really isn't any competition between them to say, hey, we've got a shorter week, come over here. Another benefit that people will often list is attendance. With an extra day each week, it makes sense as students and staff will be able to schedule their appointments more easily without having to take time out of the school week. If there's no school on Friday, they can just schedule all of the appointments on Friday. And teachers will be less likely to take days off due to stress. Now, right now, there doesn't appear to be any solid evidence about whether or not teachers are improving their attendance on the system, but it doesn't look as though it significantly impacts the attendance of students. At most, it's a minimal improvement. One thing that does seem to be a benefit of having a 4-day school week, at least with the schools that are currently doing it, is increased family time. One very surprising finding related to the 4-day school week is that not only do teachers and students say that they prefer the 4-day week to a 5-day week, and of course they would, but parents also seem to respond very positively as well. Families have reported that they're able to spend more time doing activities together. Keep in mind that this is mostly rural districts where there's more likely to be at least one parent home during the week, and so that parent's able to use that time to do more things with the children. Now, this benefit, of course, doesn't apply if the student spends that extra day just sitting in front of video games at home, but as it stands right now, parents and families in general seem to really enjoy having that extra time to spend together. And finally, another benefit given is that there's less stress, especially for teachers. One thing that teachers often talk about is the workload. Instead of having shorter school weeks, some districts are having to increase class sizes in order to save money. And if there are no subs, sometimes classes have to double up. And this can put a lot of extra work on teachers. Keep in mind that teachers spend the majority of their workday in front of students, which gives them a very short time to actually plan everything that they're going to do during that time in front of the students. And not only that, they have to grade, they have to do other paperwork, especially documentation as relates to behaviors and IEPs and all of that other fun stuff. So having that day off during the week will allow them to actually plan and do the paperwork rather than having to try and squeeze it in those short little half-hour to 1-hour planning periods that they're given throughout the school day. So overall, it sounds like the potential benefits are the fact that it would help the school budget, save money. It could potentially help with teacher recruitment and retainment, could also potentially help with attendance. It does appear to help with increased family time, and it causes less stress for teachers. However, there are also drawbacks or potential drawbacks to a 4-day week. One of the big drawbacks often listed is the fact that it has the longer school days. So since they don't have school on either Monday or Friday, they need to have that extra hour during the day, and especially for younger kids, this could be a lot. This could be a lot of staying in the classroom, not being able to run around. So it does have an impact on students because they will have to sit for a longer time. Teachers can negate this by making sure to have more movement activities and more group work activities throughout the day, but that does mean a little more planning. Luckily, they have that extra day to do that. It could also potentially impact finances. As right now, studies have shown that it does not appear to be negatively impacting families. Families have not reported more food insecurity due to the fact that students will have less meals at school each week. However, again, 90% of these districts are currently rural districts, and if this were to become more popular in urban areas where it's more likely that there will be single parents or parents working outside the home, then those parents may potentially have to spend extra money on daycare for that day off of school, and this could be a factor that would impact the family finances. On the other hand, though, they may not need to provide daycare after school during the week. If the students are at school longer, then those students may be at school until the time the parent gets off of work, and they'll only have to be paying for daycare for the day off instead of for that after school care. So as of right now, studies have shown that it does not impact finances, but as these school districts, these 4-day districts, start moving into more urban areas, it's possible we can start seeing some differences. And also the final one, the big potential drawback, which I mentioned back at the beginning, is what impact does it have on student achievement? Obviously, if students are going to be at school less, then this will impact their achievement, right? Well, this is a complicated question, actually. It is the one that has been the most researched, but let me do a quick rundown of a few results here. There is a study from the RAND Corporation that found that while there didn't appear to be any immediate differences in student achievement, at least no significant immediate differences, over the course of several years, they did see that students were sort of slowly falling behind in a 4-day district. There was another study done of 4-day districts in Oregon that found that shortened weeks have detrimental impacts on student achievement, particularly for boys and low-income students. Another study published in the MIT Press Direct indicated a positive relationship between a 4-day school week and academic achievement. And a Science Direct study found that student achievement was negatively impacted in 4-day districts that had a low overall time in school, but for districts that had longer days and still had a higher number of hours at school, there was no difference. So, overall, there are studies saying that it's having positive impacts. Some say it has a negative impact. Some say it has a negative impact, but only over a long period of time. And we have a study that says that as long as they go to school for the right number of hours, it doesn't have any impact at all. Right now, the jury's out on whether or not 4-day school weeks actually seem to impact student achievement. And obviously, it's a complex issue, At this point, it's still hard to say whether the 4-day school week is going to be helpful to students overall when we factor in not just achievement, but also student mental well-being and being able to spend that time with family. But this is something that schools are doing right now, mostly, as I said, because of the financial implications, because they want to be able to save money. If we were able to fund schools better, maybe there would be fewer school districts moving to this trend. Since there are so many different studies that have found different results as far as achievement, it is very likely that if any negative results could come from having a 4-day week, they could easily be negated by just having teachers use that day off as a time for tutoring, or just having schools have longer school days, or making sure that teachers are maximizing the amount of teaching time when the students are actually in school. And again, they should have the planning time to be able to do this, hopefully. But what are your thoughts on here? You can just let me know in the comments down below. What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea for students to move to a 4-day week? Can it possibly benefit them in the long run as far as mental well-being and academics? Or do you think that's just hurting our students and it's going to get in the way of them becoming productive adults in the future? Let me know. For right now, have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.